Hello and welcome to Up Only TV. I'm Ledger, and this is a different episode because our hosts today are Fitch and Deeze, and we're doing a special series called Looks Rare, all about NFTs. Fitch and Deeze are extremely experienced in this realm, and they're going to guide us through everything you want to know. Whether you're a beginner or you've been involved in NFTs for a long time, they're going to take care of us. It's the basic information, in-depth debates and interviews interspersed throughout. This is I think 6-part miniseries. They're going to guide us throughout. We're so thankful that they're here to host Looks Rare for us. This episode, just like every episode, is brought to you by FTX. Go to uponly.tv/FTX. You can make a trade there today, earn interest on your assets, 8% up to $10,000 and 5% beyond $10,000. You can do it all on FTX, uponly.tv/FTX. And of course, you can track your portfolio and swap directly from any asset to another asset through the FTX app. We're so thankful for them for being our partners. Go to uponly.tv/FTX. Now let's get right to it. Hello and welcome to Fitch and Deeze.
Awesome. Hey, thanks, Ledger. Yeah, we're excited to be here. My name's Fitch, for those of you who don't know me, and for those who do. Been actively trading NFTs for quite a while now, been full-time in the NFT space for going on 2 years. So that feels like ancient history. And Deeze, if you want to intro yourself as well.
Yeah, I'm Deeze. I've been around NFTs for about a year now. I bought my first punk in September of 2020. And I've been pretty much addicted to NFTs since. Before that, I got into crypto in 2017. So I've been around for a while, and I'm currently the community manager over at Fractional. And our guest is Purphat, who is now the CTO at ArtBlocks. He's one of my older friends in the NFT space. We have known each other since basically when I got into punks. And he is like a technical mastermind with all things like blockchain and NFTs.
Cool. Yeah. So I'm Jake. I am the CTO at ArtBlocks. Before that, I was a software engineer at Google. I've been kind of in the Ethereum space since 2017. This is when I started to get really interested and involved in the space. Mostly just as like an engineer who was interested in the interesting kind of like intersection of software engineering and economic design problems that were being tackled. For about a year, I was a contributor to Viper, which is a programming language for the EVM that's kind of an alternative to Solidity, more Python oriented. Otherwise had done like some small kind of bug bounties and things like that in the space, but have mostly been just like an interested spectator and until this year, started to get more involved with NFTs. Really struck this chord for me of being interested, specifically generative art NFTs. It just really clicked for me and seeing wow, there's this interesting art form that you can create that's created with code, and that's just like this perfect fit for this for the blockchain, where you could have this magical experience of like getting to participate in the creation of that art. And so that got me really interested in ArtBlocks and in generative art. Started to get really actively involved in the ArtBlocks community, ended up becoming an advisor for ArtBlocks and just like a pretty active community member and moderator there in the ArtBlocks Discord. And, got so interested in things that I decided to leave the comfy life at Google and dive headfirst into being able to focus all my time on this. So, I'm pretty excited about it. It's been a pretty busy last week and a half here, just like getting up to speed on all the exciting moving details at ArtBlocks, but super excited to be more fully focused in the space now.
You're so humble about it. Like, I don't want to cut Fitch off. Like, you have 4 projects on ArtBlocks right now. Like at Ledger, I see you have the thing up there. Like, open up Stipple Sunsets, which is under the factory. And like, your art's awesome. I love your vibe. And I just wanted to bring up the fact that you were also a generative artist. You didn't mention it. You didn't mention you have 4 projects on ArtBlocks, but like, your art kicks ass. It's the perfect good morning meme. And I love it, right? Like I look at the sunset and it's like GM. And then the day is like already started and it's great because you're happy. It's like, I just want to thank you for going on. I had to bring that up.
Yeah, thank you. I always feel a little bit weird, like plugging my own art. But yeah, I've done 4 projects now on the on ArtBlocks, it's been like another kind of big thing to me to try to set like a precedent or to encourage like more people to do on-chain donations with their art. Like that was something that I don't know, it was a big deal to me, like with my first ArtBlocks project and just making a commitment, like every time I do an ArtBlocks project, I'm going to donate 50% of the proceeds. So that's been a big aspect of this to me, is like being able to create something beautiful, hopefully for people, and also like allow them to feel like they're buying something that like they're getting to participate in the act of doing good. It's just like a cool feeling all around. So yeah, I have art that
lay people though, who may not understand what ArtBlocks is. Could you give a little bit of an introduction to what is the spirit and the ethos of the platform? I know Deeze and myself are minting very early on, in the history of ArtBlocks, but there will be a lot of listeners who won't be familiar with just how cool it is and all the exciting things happening there. So if you had to give like let's say a paragraph description of what ArtBlocks is, what would you describe it as?
Yeah, so I first I think I would take a step back and like kind of brief people on what generative art is. And so at a high level, like generative art is writing a program or creating a set of instructions that let you create multiple different outputs that have a consistent theme or a consistent concept, consistent structure to them. So it's like writing a program that spits out art is maybe like a really succinct way of putting it. And so, this art form has existed for a long time. Before blockchain technology existed at all, there were people kind of with early computers trying to think like, how can I make art with this computer? But there's been this weird thing where there hasn't been like a way to have an original of a digital, you could say, until blockchain technology allowed you to prove that. And so what ArtBlocks does is says, let's take that algorithm that creates art and let's put that on the blockchain. And then for the individual outputs of that algorithm, let's let the user create them at the time of purchase. And so when you're buying an ArtBlocks piece, you actually get to like participate in the creation of that art piece, because it doesn't exist. The unique output that is yours doesn't exist until the moment you mint it. And so it's kind of like Deeze has put it, like getting to rip open a pack of cards or something. It's like this really cool experience of you don't know what you're going to get until you get it, but more so than it just being like a pack of cards that already has a specific set of contents. No one actually knows like what's inside that pack of cards until it's open. And so like, even as the artist, you get to sit there and watch the outputs come out, and you get to be surprised by like what the actual final set of mints are. And sometimes if the algorithm is really diverse in its outputs, like that final set of mints can be really surprising to you as the artist. There might be outputs where you're like, oh, like how did that happen? That's wonky. And so that to me is there's some magic there. Like it's you're able to like distill this moment of creating the art to be something that not only the artist gets to enjoy, but somehow like all of the participants in the process get to enjoy that. And so, yeah, it's a pretty fun thing. I think like the first time I got to the first ArtBlocks piece I bought was a ringer that I bought on secondary. And the first like ArtBlocks piece that I minted was a color study by Jeff Davis. And like that experience, like I bought the piece on ArtBlocks and from OpenSea. I was like, this is really cool. And then it was like, after I minted something finally, that it like really clicked for me. And it was like, holy shit, like this is amazing. Like, I got to see kind of what some of the outputs were, and I'm sitting there waiting as my transaction processes. And then you like get hit with this magic moment of being like, oh, wow, like it's here. And, at the time minting was a lot slower. And so like Jeff was in Discord being like, oh, cool. Like, that's a good one. Like, I didn't know what it was going to be either. So it's pretty fun, I think.
So, you mentioned something there that I've been particularly keen on as like one of the magical aspects of NFTs is that being part of the creation of it, right? And when you merge generative and blockchain together, you get that in a really pure form. And that's what I would say the essence of ArtBlocks is, as you described there. What are the other things that the blockchain does for art as NFT, or kind of what are the other galvanizing factors that sort of merit or necessitate the blockchain being involved? Because you have this party of people that will say, okay, well, digital art has existed before, the blockchain, and well, okay, but what about the environmental impacts of the blockchain, which we did, discuss in the prior segment, and I think we've kind of thoroughly addressed those concerns. But still, maybe somebody's thinking, okay, what else is the blockchain really providing here that's a substantive benefit to that art experience or that collectibles experience? And you touched on some of it, but maybe go a little bit further into that.
Yeah, I think the thing when you ask the question that like immediately jumps out to me the first is this idea of like democratizing provenance is how I think about it. And so like if you think about like a pre-NFT world, like if you wanted to buy a piece of art where you had strong guarantees about like where it came from and if it was authentic, you really had to be like going through like a high-end art dealer or an auction house or something with like an entry point that was like probably in the thousands of dollars, if not like tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars, depending on kind of what kind of provenance and documentation you wanted around that. And I don't know, there's something about that like I think inherently locks out a certain subset of people from even, I don't know, like being interested or feeling like they can have art that they can point to and like feel confident in like where it came from and being able to speak to its history, or if you will. And so like the thing that's really cool with NFTs is like, you could buy an NFT that costs like a few $100s, or maybe even less, like, with gas, let's say it costs like $100 or something like that. And you can have like the exact same guarantees around provenance, around being able to look at it and say like, where did this come from? Who created it? Who else has owned it? When was it created? And that's what I mean by provenance, is kind of that like that history, that record of ownership. You can have the exact same guarantees as like somebody who's spending $1 million on an autoglyph or something like that. And that to me is like really powerful. The other thing that I think about is like this idea of detaching like ownership from access. So like if I want to access, some painting by, even if I want to access like the Mona Lisa, like I have to be able to like fly to Paris and like get a ticket to the Louvre and like book accommodations, like all these things, right? And so like my experience, like sure, I can go on Google and look at like what does the Mona Lisa look like, but I'm not going to see it for scale. I'm not going to get to see the detail in the painting. Like I'm experiencing a different version of that art, not the authentic version of that art, when I look at it online. Versus like if I want to go look at, like the I don't know, cowboy hat alien, like if anyone who has an internet connection can go look at that piece of art and experience it in a pretty similar way to each other. Like they're experiencing the original because the original is a digital. And the ownership of that has been something that's been kind of detached and separated. And you could say like, you don't have to own the thing to be able to choose who gets access to it necessarily. And that to me is really like, I don't know, strikes an important note in some like philosophical level of like, like you're like really interneting the art in a way that like wasn't the case before. In that you're saying like, yeah, you can still own things. Like people care about owning things for, whatever silly reasons make our brains human and want to own things. But like, just because you own something or don't doesn't mean that you necessarily are the one who gets to experience it or decide who experiences it.
Well, I mean, it brings up Deeze's, galleries, right, in VR space, right? And Deeze, maybe talk about those, because I think that is an extension of that concept, Jake, that you're talking about, where, not only is the digital native art able to be appreciated digitally, but now we can go further. We can take it into VR, we can take it in the metaverse. So talk about that, Deeze, kind of pick up the thread on, what is exciting about having your own gallery, which you do for your, various pieces in your collection. And why did you do that?
Yeah, so having a digital gallery is like, to me, it's most of the benefits of having a physical gallery with like almost none of the negatives. Number one, like I don't need to go like rent out a gallery or buy property to display this stuff. And number two, I don't need to physically custody all of this art and make sure that, it's not damaged and it's in good condition to show it off. I have a few galleries. Looks like Ledger's bringing up my favorite one. This gallery is like my favorite trippy vibe NFTs. So it's a bunch of Killer Acid, a bunch of Pop Wonder. The back wall is my collectibles. It's some punks. And then like flipping around, I got like the giant Matt Fury pegs up on the wall. But it's a way for me to show off all of my favorite NFTs and like a pretty, thematic, I think, assortment. And I also have like multiple galleries at different themes. Like this one is just this trippy vibe, right?
My piece over there. I saw it.
Your piece is in there, Fitch. It's right there. The Monet's flower.
I'm honored to be next to some really truly heavy hitting art there, man. That's amazing.
You're next to Claudie Monet, which is a Pepe Monet.
What I mean by
which it was one of the first ever NFTs I bought. Actually, I went down like a rareable rabbit hole buying Pepe fan art because it just cracked me up. Like I have loved Pepe and Matt Fury since like before Matt Fury made NFTs, and I was all like for just buying every Pepe derivative I could find. But going back to kind of what Purphat said about provenance too, it's like a lot of these pieces, I haven't minted these in particular, but like my ArtBlocks, I'm the one who minted it. Like I'm the artist or creator in a way. And even if I ever sell those pieces, it's like my name is etched in the blockchain as being the first account who received this NFT from the contract as it was minted. And I take like a lot of pride in having minted, like 200 plus ArtBlocks. And I try to get like some of my ArtBlocks in the hands of friends or people I respect, because for me, it's like I'm giving them an extension of not only my collection, but of like myself. Like at that point in time, that day, with the gas fee I chose, I was given this transaction hash, which went into the ArtBlocks algorithm and made this piece. And like, that's so cool to me. So when I give a piece that I minted to somebody, it's like, special. It's different. It's like Purphat mentioned he bought his ringer on the secondary and it was cool, right? But it wasn't, as cool as when he minted that color study and was like, bam, like, wow, that's mine. And the world has never seen this until this millisecond right now. Mm-hmm. And then like to have the artists come in and share, oh, that's rare. But like, I think some of the color studies, if they had like a 4, I forget it's like Albers, but it was like with like a 4 and a B, it would make like a square, right? So it's like this very unique shape one. It's like, if you got one of those, you're like, oh, this is like, super rare. And then Jeff would be like super excited to see it. And that excitement, just like, the minting this stuff back in the day was cheap, right? Like it was relatively inexpensive. It's gotten to the point now where it's kind of competitive and there's a lot of demand, which is great for the artists, but it's a different time. And back then it was just more like, look at these enthusiasts just minting and sharing what they get and like just being so stoked at like the art. And that's what made me fall in love with ArtBlocks, like Stofro's reaction, the Jeff Davis's reactions, and all the artists. They're so accessible too, right? Like all the artists have their own channel in the Discord. They're all very accessible. Even Tyler Hobbs, like email him, get your print, like talk to him. He's just another dude in the Discord. And it's so cool to be a part of this movement because like I never anticipated this would ever happen. It was just a hobby that we were doing for fun because we like the art.
Yeah, I think there's something about that, that echoes what Jake was saying about the democratization of the experience. It becomes more of a dialogue with yourself, with the machine, with the blockchain, and with the artists, right? And all of those are parties that you're talking to. So not to be a Debbie Downer, but to transition into something that I think people will kind of want to hear from your perspective, having that conversation about sort of the environmental concerns around, blockchain, public blockchain networks and how they're secured. Maybe talk people through at a somewhat high level of like, what's the difference between proof of work and proof of stake? And, if Ethereum is in a certain state now of energy consumption, where will it be in 2 years, right? Because those of us who are in the industry know about Ethereum's movement to ETH 2.0. Those of us who are not do not know about that, and it's an important piece of information. So maybe just kind of high level talk about that, difference between proof of work and stake, and then, whereas we now have a certain number around energy consumption for Ethereum, where is that number going to be in 2 years because of the technology itself evolving?
Sure. Yeah. So like at a high level, proof of work and proof of stake are both consensus algorithms, which means that they're like essentially like ways to keep people honest. So you have this, with a distributed ledger, it's this technology for recording the state of information changing over time. And, in a decentralized public ledger, like anybody can write to that state or say what it's supposed to be. And so you need a way to keep people honest and make sure they're not like recording information that's unfair and just says like, hey, I like the things you have, they're mine now. And so proof of work, like both proof of work and proof of stake accomplish this by making it expensive to cheat or to lie. Proof of work makes it expensive to cheat or to lie by saying, hey, if you want to update the state of the public ledger, you're gonna have to solve these really hard math problems that they're like intentionally made to be arbitrarily hard. And the way that you do that is you have really powerful computers that solve these problems. And so, because you have these computers working really hard to solve problems, that uses, a significant amount of energy. Proof of stake says like, instead of doing work to kind of prove that you have something to lose, we're instead going to make you, lock up some money that you have at stake. And if you're, a cheater or a liar, we're going to take the money that you had at stake and we're going to like set it on fire. We're going to burn it, throw it away. And, that system is just kind of inherently more energy efficient because you don't have to have this like the problems that you're solving computationally just have to be as hard as like what is necessary to update the state of the information, which is not that complicated. It's like, hey, like move this token from this person to this person, or move these, values from from A to B, but not necessarily like do some really hard math for the sake of doing really hard math. And so I think the energy efficiency there is like a 99% increase in efficiency, in that it like consumes 1% or less than 1% of the energy of proof of work. And this is something that's like always been on the roadmap for Ethereum. Kind of since Ethereum was created, it had this outlook of we're going to start with proof of work, establish like a strong economic base for the network, because an important part of proof of stake is like the network has to be worth something, or like the tokens have to be worth something. Otherwise, if you have like proof of stake and the network as a whole is worth like $10 million, well then like anybody with $10 million can just come in, which like, let's say like a nation state, for example, like $10 million is a drop in the bucket, and they can just come in and say like, oh, like you made this, like I made this is my network now. So, the Ethereum ethos was like, let's start with proof of work. Let's build this robust kind of technology and network effect, and then we'll move to proof of stake over time. And it turns out that moving to from proof of work to proof of stake is like a little bit more complicated than starting with proof of stake from the outset. And so it's taken a little bit of time, but and I think the current estimate is like at the latest it'll be Q1 of next year. There's maybe like a really optimistic take that says it happens at the end of this year, but I think that's pretty brutally optimistic. But definitely in 2 years' time, we'll I think have seen Ethereum move to being fully validated with proof of stake, which means there's no longer this energy intensive mining algorithm going on, and instead the network is secured by people saying like, hey, I'm not going to lie or cheat, and if I do, burn my money and I'll pay the fine, basically.
Yeah, appreciate the context there. What you might say an analogy is to get into a club or some kind of private gathering, someone says, go plow 5 fields, right? Versus give me a sack of grain as collateral. Yep. Both systems are designed to keep you honest. One is designed to do so through work, which in this case is computation, and the other one is more collateral. So, stake something that you have that's of value, in this case, Ethereum tokens, and that forms your incentive to not cheat. So
Yeah.
for anyone listening, I think sometimes analogies maybe help in these cases because these concepts can be pretty weighty. But yeah, I mean, what you talked about there is the implication, which is something I really want to drive home. The implication of this is that the Ethereum network is going to be 99% more efficient once this migration happens. So I think even if there was maybe a dissatisfaction with some of the comparable energy expenditures in the world, or just how small of an energy expenditure cryptocurrency is compared to other relevant things, this would give you some solace to know that we are still moving towards a state where this is massively more efficient than it is now. And maybe Jake, talk a little bit about other blockchains as well, because certainly Ethereum is not the only blockchain in the world that's a public blockchain that NFTs are being minted on. We do have other examples, including Flow and Tezos. So maybe talk a little bit about that. Like, what's your perspective on those other blockchains outside of just a beginner introduction to the fact that there are other blockchains? How do you look at those when it comes to provenance, when it comes to authenticity? Are you kind of really strictly an Ethereum blockchain maximalist when it comes to NFTs, or do you think that there's merit on these other chains?
Yeah, I think it depends like a little bit on what your goals are. So like, I think it's hard to debate like that. Ethereum currently offers the most, say like decentralized blockchain network with the strongest, or at least decentralized blockchain network that supports smart contracts. So like putting Bitcoin aside, Ethereum currently offers kind of the most decentralization, and with that kind of strongest guarantees around like immutability over time. And so, to me, that's like a really important characteristic for things that are really high value for like, so like if you were going to collateralize or if you were going to tokenize the mortgage for your house as an NFT, for example, like you would want really, really strong guarantees around kind of immutability and decentralization. That is like, some subset of the network couldn't just decide like, hey, you don't get to have this thing anymore. Similarly that like the network itself doesn't just like disappear over time. And the record of kind of ownership is lost, due to the sands of time. And so that's where like for me and what I'm looking for as a collector is like, I'm for the most part looking to buy things where I can feel like, oh, I could hold this for like my entire life or for decades, and I don't have to have anxiety about it like disappearing or needing to migrate it from an L1 to a different L1 or like some weird stuff like that. But like, when I think about, for example, like I'm not a big gamer, but I think about like, in-game assets, for example, and there's a use case where I start to like, I guess maybe I'm dramatically misunderstanding this use case because like I'm not a gamer, but like I look and say like, okay, like in-game skins, like, is that something that needs as strong of guarantees as like fine art in terms of like, hey, this is going to be here in 50 years, or do we need like more of a guarantee that like this is going to be here for a few years or something like that?
And then talk a little bit about the trade-offs, right? Because if there weren't any trade-offs, certainly you would take the more robust provenance solution. But what you're kind of implying is there are trade-offs. So
sure,
some of them are economic and otherwise.
I think the trade-off is mostly like a cost trade-off. So it's like, how much money are you willing to pay for increased decentralization? And this is where like, I think that some competing chains are making this trade-off more honestly than others. So like Solana, I think, is a great example of a L1 chain that like makes this trade-off very honestly. They say like, we think that we should increase kind of like the hardware requirements for running a full node. Yes, this may decrease, this is kind of somewhat of a simplification, but like, yes, this may decrease decentralization a bit, but the network can still be sufficiently decentralized in that like maybe there's not going to be hundreds of thousands or millions of nodes, but there's going to be thousands of nodes or tens of thousands of nodes. And we think this is decentralized enough for certain purposes. And because we're making this trade-off, things can be a lot less expensive, higher bandwidth, et cetera. I think that that's a very honest trade-off. And like, there's a question of kind of like how much decentralization is enough is I think like an open philosophical question, or like an open kind of question for debate, and like testing over time of like, does something that wasn't decentralized enough but was decentralized get exploited on a multi-year time horizon? Like, I don't think we know enough yet. I think that things are still so early that it's hard to say. But yeah, so like I think the trade-off there is really like at a high level, I think on Ethereum L1, you're going to end up having to kind of pay more for these really strong guarantees. There's additional things like, Ethereum L2, for example, or Ethereum sidechains that are checkpointed. So like, without getting too technical, it's like you have with a checkpointing sidechain, you have like something that runs alongside Ethereum, and every once in a while it checks in and says like, here's the state of the world. With L2s, you're using like kind of more complicated cryptographic techniques to prove that you're making transactions that inherit the underlying security of Ethereum, but require somebody to basically be checking if you're lying still. And so like those allow you to have kind of like different gradations or different areas of gray between the how strong of guarantees do you want and how much are you willing to pay for them. And I think that that's like ultimately what the trade-offs are. I think that like, there's no free lunch here, and like anyone telling you that like, oh, like you can have all of the strong guarantees and it won't cost you anything, like that feels pretty disingenuous to me. And like, because at the end of the day, like there's some kind of cold hard economics at play here. And you have to be, if you want something that's less expensive or higher bandwidth, it probably involves some sort of trade-off.
So the kind of spectrum, at the one end, there's potentially longevity, but not necessarily, because at the end of the day, longevity is also contingent upon how many people want to use it. Yep. If nobody uses it, it doesn't have longevity because nobody's using it. So more of the provenance and the rigorousness of the decentralization that's associated. And then, on the other side, it's kind of scaling and low cost. So a lot of transactions can be put through because maybe some of those core tenets have been bent a little bit that necessitate decentralization. And, at the same time, you're also saving money. Would you say that's kind of a fair summary? Yeah. And then also would ask Deeze's opinion on these questions as well, because, I think it'd be interesting to get his thoughts on what is an appropriate amount of decentralization.
Yeah, I think that's a very fair spectrum kind of depiction.
I always think of it on the like decentralization on one end and throughput on the other end. And then you're sliding behind, like, if you want the highest throughput, it's like you're on a centralized server that everyone's connected to.
Fascinating is like, where does the ideal balance fall? Because the ideal balance has people using it. And it's, there's obviously real concerns about the current state of Ethereum and continued usage by people who aren't wealthy, frankly, because of the associated costs.
It's really tough. Like I think it's a philosophical question. Like, where do you think the right balance is? Like, I think a lot of us are very diehard on the decentralization angle, and we think that, decentralization, even if it comes at a more expensive cost right now to use it, we prefer it over the centralized alternatives. And I think it's because a lot of us, like, I don't want to speak for Jake, who comes from Google, but like we look at the Web 2.0 monoliths that we have right now, and we look at, how they're kind of just up in their panopticon looking down at us and choosing whatever the fuck we do, and we have no say in it. And we don't want a future like that. It's very Orwellian. I think a lot of us grew up reading 1984, and we think like, hey, like this is becoming a reality, and how can we reverse this? So, maybe you could even say we're in a place of economic privilege to use Ethereum over something like Solana at this point. But it's very important for us to have this decentralized ethos. So like on my spectrum, I weight it, heavier on the decentralized side than I do throughput because of, everything I just outlined.
It feels to me like almost Ethereum and Solana started from different sides of the spectrum, right? Ethereum started from more of a rigorous import on decentralization. And then Solana started from more of a rigorous import on throughput and positive sum economics for people who don't have, $500 to spend on gas per transaction. But the idea is that they're working towards a similar point. I think Solana's banking on the fact that if their economics are good and their throughput is good, then more people are going to use the system and more people are going to run nodes, and it'll be more decentralized over time. Whereas Ethereum is kind of saying we'll work from the opposite angle, and we'll get to a point where the transactions are cheaper and the throughput's better. So yeah, that feels to me like it's a little bit of a race in terms of who gets to whatever ideal place. But would you agree, Jake, that nobody's really quite gotten to that ideal place?
Yeah, I think definitely we haven't gotten to that ideal place. Just in terms of direct roadmap, I think there's focus on the Solana side of and there's kind of focus on it, and also an expectation that hardware will get cheaper over time, and that's kind of a way to increase node count over time, and that's the trajectory that's envisioned there. And then on the Ethereum side, there's kind of the moving to proof of stake should allow for some increase in bandwidth. More importantly, things like sharding should allow for increases in bandwidth, and the kind of proliferation of L2s, which are just in the process of actually really shipping. Those should increase bandwidth and are kind of this in between layer where you get most of the security of Ethereum L1, but you get much cheaper, higher throughput. But yeah, so I think we're definitely not there yet, and that there's a lot of stuff that's just immediately on the roadmap to be done. And then there's also, I think, opportunities for there to be, I think people like to frame Solana and Ethereum as competitors, and in some respect they are in the kind of way that the current ecosystem of users thinks about them. But when you think about the next billions of users that are going to be kind of onboarded to being users of blockchain, I don't think they're really competitors at all, and that there's a giant pie to be kind of eaten over time. And it's very possible that a version of the future looks most of the kind of immediate transaction processing is being done on Solana, let's say, and Ethereum is still the global settlement layer of value, and kind of where you expect to go for finality and understanding who really owns what. And then Solana is kind of this higher throughput, less final state of the world, but they both are working kind of cooperatively in some respect. And it's very possible that the future of the world looks like that. It's just hard to say from where we sit now. But I think I try not to get too wrapped up in them necessarily being mutually exclusive competitors by any stretch of the imagination. They make different trade-offs, and if I'm looking to buy a specific piece of art, there's a set of those trade-offs that's really important to me as an art purchaser. But especially when you start to get into the world of fungible assets, if I have stable coins, for example, that I just expect to track roughly the US dollar, I want to know that they're relatively secure, but I have less of a specific tie up on, I might have some more flexibility or some more open-mindedness as to okay, if I'm deploying it in a very active strategy, or if I'm moving it around a lot, or if I'm doing different things with it, it's not I'm sitting it somewhere and just want to be sure that it's there in 20 years or something like that.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. I think the stablecoin analogy is a good one because, that's more of a immediately needing to do a very specific kind of a function, and also is tied to this other thing that's relatively stable, right? Being the US dollar. So, that's a good example to say that in certain cases, maybe I don't require all of those other decentralized aspects or all of that other longevity. And in that sense, I agree with that take of Solana's got, a lot of potential and likely is not going to be a competitor for Ethereum in the future. If people perceive that it is now to some extent, maybe there's some validity to that. But my perspective as just someone who likes art is, you know, I'm now starting to see great art on Solana. And so I think that's kind of made me want to go check it out. Is that, you know, hey, economics aside, if I'm already cool with the economics of Ethereum, I certainly won't be worried about them on Solana. And now it's about the kind of quality of the outputs catching up, which I think slowly it is. So I want to transition to a couple other interesting questions to kind of wrap things up here. So this one's for both you and Deeze, kind of go back to back answering. And you started to touch on it there, but you know, if you're thinking 2 years from now, right, what does the NFT space look like to you? And that's a question for both of you guys. And then we'll wrap up with the question, what are the examples of sort of like positive social good you've seen from NFTs? So for starters, we'll touch on that. Just, you know, shot in the dark, 2 years from now, what do you kind of think is going to be the general state of things in NFTs? Are there going to be new things that we haven't seen? Are certain things that we're seeing now going to go away? And that could be, you know, economics are not going to be the same, or that could be that certain kinds of art aren't going to exist, or new ones are going to pop out of the ether. So talk to us a little bit about that, Jake, if you would.
Yeah, so I think like on like the micro level, like on the individual artist level, I hope we'll see like just a lot more cool people pushing the boundaries of doing like really interesting things that use the blockchain as a medium. So like I think of an artist like Def Beef and like, you know, him creating these interactive audio visual art pieces where like you get to participate in programming the output as an on-chain transaction. Like that stuff is really cool and trippy. And I think that's like a design space that's just really started to be explored in depth this year. So I hope we see a lot more of that on the individual artist level. I think on like the macro level, like what does the industry look like as a whole? Like my biggest expectation would be just like a lot more people. So like both kind of on the collector and the creator side. You know, there's a lot of artists that like I've interacted with in kind of human space that I've talked to about NFTs, and like it's not even on their radar at all. And you know, I think that like in 2 years, if that's the case, it'd be really surprising to me. And so, you know, I think that what that means is like there's a lot more art, a lot more options, a lot more platforms. And you know, that probably also means that like it's a lot more accessible for people as well, right? Like if there's right now, like something we see with ArtBlocks is like there's way more demand than there is supply for art. And you know, I think that that's it's something we're very mindful of at ArtBlocks, but also like onboarding artists is like a process, and like there's a lot of moving pieces, and so it's hard to like acutely address right away. But like on a multi-year timeline, like you think, okay, like, well, you know, we think we're doing a really cool thing in the space, but there's going to be more platforms, more creators, other options, other things that exist. And so, you know, hopefully that means that like people can come to NFTs and find something that really resonates with them as a piece of art at a price that they can afford, because there's just like so many options that it's like, you know, going to, it's kind of like going to a local art fair and going to eBay or Amazon, like all in one type of experience in terms of the things that are available in the NFT ecosystem as the whole. Yeah, what do you think, Deeze?
I would be willing to bet that there is going to be a game with, let's say, a million plus players that is using Solana as the backbone for the transactions in the game. I've been trying to keep an eye on what Sam is doing and where he's spending his money as he quickly becomes one of the richest people in the world. And he is very keen on the sports gambling and the gaming industries, and he's not afraid to spend money to get attention there. And I think the next natural step is to actually like get some stuff built on where he's invested. I'm very excited to see a game that is on the blockchain, so I'm also very biased here. I really want a game like RuneScape that's on chain, where I can take my in-game items and bring them out of the game, lend against them, trade them for art, you know, whatever, but use them outside of the game, all within a Web3 environment. I think what Purphat mentioned about ArtBlocks being more accessible for all is going to be really exciting. I can't imagine an Amazon-esque store where instead of like, you know, anything on Amazon, it's just art. It's different algorithms.
Not
like
for ArtBlocks necessarily, just like
no,
for
I
all
mean,
of the
I'm
NFT
just like,
space.
I think of like how saturated Factory could get and how like many different things could be going on if there's an easier way to scale up onboarding. And like, it's an exciting thing to imagine. Right now it's been wild because like you said, the demand has come out of nowhere. Everyone sees number go up and they demand that their number goes up, but it's so good for the artists. Like, watching somebody be able to drop 1,000 quantity drops that sell for 5 Ethereum each. It's like, holy shit. Like, they just brought in 5,000 Ethereum as an artist for a drop. And 2 years from now, it's like, how many more people can we onboard? How big can this community get? I think like the sky's the limit. Obviously, I'm overly optimistic, but I think it's gonna be wild. And I think we're just getting started.
Yeah,
like hearing that your first ArtBlocks project was color studies. I'm like, wow, I was like, I was using ArtBlocks before the CTO of ArtBlocks was using ArtBlocks.
Yeah, same. I was minting squiggles at the beginning, dude. I mean,
I really wish, like, I never knew at the time, right? Like, if I go back to when I was minting squiggles, it was like, I'm just sitting here dumb high. It's like $35 to just mint a squiggle because Ethereum was cheap and it was really cheap. And it was just fun. It was like, let's fire off like 4 of these on slow and see what happens. And I'll always have like fond memories, but I wish I could go back and like relive it again, because at the time I just never knew like how special that point in history was. It was just like, oh, Snowfro just sold like 5 of the zombies to fund ArtBlocks. So like, let's go mint some of these to support Snowfro because he's a fucking awesome dude. Like, that was the only thought about it. And to think of where we are now in a 9 or 10 or 11 short months, like, wow.
Yeah. It's
how do you accurately speculate like 2 years in the future when like I can't see like 30 days in the future?
That's why it's a fun question to watch you guys squirm a little bit, because it's impossible to know.
I mean, what are you most looking forward to the next 2 years, Fitch?
Yeah, it definitely. Well, you guys touched on gaming. Gaming is hugely sort of interesting to me. Got the little parallel rep in here now. So that's one of the projects that I'm probably the project that I'm most keen on at this point, just for the sake of the quality of the lore, the quality of the art, the usage of NFTs as a technological layer to actually support community and gaming. Really, really excited about that. So that's a franchise that I think 2 years from now is going to be blowing people's minds. I mean, already they're putting out things that are shocking, right? That I've never seen before. And we're just getting started. So yeah, I mean, I think the other thing that wasn't said that I would say is kind of the ease of deployment of like really interesting NFT projects. I think it's going to get a lot easier to be like me and not have the technical knowledge that Jake has and be able to deploy some really advanced stuff. I've already seen some demos of some tools that are coming that aren't really advanced now, but they at least take the basics and they make it really easy. So it's a thing where it's not as difficult as it would be. Obviously, to do a lot of the things that are being done at ArtBlocks, it's going to take a lot of time to get that down to a level where the average person can engage with it without any like really substantial technical knowledge. And I'm excited for that, because one of the things that's happened in NFTs that I've been really, really humbled by and sort of amazed by is how it's unlocked the artist and the collector within everyone. There's a lot of these like hard ass people on crypto Twitter who just flip Bitcoin on the 1 minute chart, and they're now like talking about the art that they love. And I love that. I think that's awesome, because I'm a lifelong art guy, and to see my peers who kind of have this like tough shell start to make themselves a bit more vulnerable and talk about art and talk about beauty and talk about collecting things is really special to me, because those things are special in my life. And so to see them become real, and we all have that within us. So I think it's, one of the things that early on in NFTs I thought was really, really bullish was like NFTs start to unlock the creative potential of people in crypto a lot more, and people outside of crypto. It's like all this new creativity awakens from understanding the dynamicism of the blockchain as a new layer of creativity, also from just like all of the economic opportunities that are being created here because of that disintermediation that we've been talking about. So, that's the other piece that I would kind of put a point on and say that I'm really excited about, is just like the human changes that are going to be engendered as a result of this technology. and also just like the ease of getting it to the masses in terms of creating it. I think we all know that it's going to be a lot easier to consume NFTs in 2 years. That probably anyone could say that, but I think it's going to be a lot easier to create NFTs and do really, really crazy stuff with them too.
I think that's a great point. I mean, there's so many, I think, like creators now that if you said like, I don't know, like Kanye West wants to do a drop on ArtBlocks, like he probably doesn't know how to write, a script in P5.js or something like that, right? But like, it doesn't mean that he doesn't have ideas that are interesting and would, create cool art on the platform. And I think that over time we'll see more of those tools come to fruition that like allow, artists or anyone with an artistic vision who wants to spend the time to like learn how to use some new tools or some new new technologies that it might not mean that they have to know how to code, but that they can create something that's kind of like generative or not, but they can create NFTs in an interesting way, like that takes advantage of the blockchain. I'm pretty excited about that.
Yeah, agreed. Felt like when I got, the first iPad and Apple Pen and how that unlocked a ton of creativity, I imagine it'll be at that seamless of a user experience with the blockchain. So final thing as we wrap up episode 1, I want to say thanks so much, Jake, for coming on and having this conversation with us. Final point I want to touch on, what is like, if you have one specific thing that's kind of NFTs for social good and like human good that you've seen, one story, one experience, it could be your own experience, it could be someone else that you've interacted with, but do you have anything that stands out? Because I know that, we've been on spaces with, ice bags and various people, and there's amazing charity work being done across all different kind of spectrums. Independent artists are getting charity, people in medical need are getting charity. You think about all the artists' lives changing type stories. Is there anything that stands out to both you guys, Deeze and Jake?
Yeah, I go ahead, Deeze.
Oh no, you. Okay, I'll go ahead. So for me, it's a collective that stands out more so than like, individual things, but it's just like watching all of these artists that I've come to know specifically from like Twitter spaces become like financially independent for the first time in their artistic career, like off of their art, is incredible. And the thing that I love the most about it is like, as soon as they get financially independent off their art, the first thing they do is buy other art, and they finally are enabled to be a collector themselves. And like, it feels like there's a magic there in terms of the reflexivity and like the community, and how just like so many people I've seen, like it's not just one person, it's like it's like hundreds of people who I've watched their lives change because NFTs. And I've just been like in awe of how giving they are as soon as they get some money. And it makes me want to give them more money, because I know it's like not going to some trader, but it's going to an artist who also loves to collect their friend and their community's art. And it's like a way to give back. And I just love it, honestly. That's my favorite thing about the space now. That's why I host so many spaces talking to artists.
Amazing stuff. Yeah, it is beautiful. Jake, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I think the thing that is so cool for me to see is just like how it's another, like, it's not one specific isolated incident, but it's just like the breadth of projects that have incorporated some degree of charitable giving into the art that they're producing. Like, I think that if you look and compare, let's say like NFTs to just like how the general art world is operating currently, I think it's pretty crazy that like, I don't want to spoil the news for the like is going to be announced soon in the next ArtBlocks newsletter, but it's like millions and millions of dollars that ArtBlocks artists have donated this year, which is like pretty mind-boggling for a platform that's existed for less than a year, and it's I think kind of struck a chord not just with like artists who are on ArtBlocks, but you see like artists who are doing their own generative art, like Def Beef did a drop the other day that was entirely for charity, and I think just like creating that like association with charity as being like a core component of the space is something that's really important to me personally, and I hope something that like we don't lose over time, but that instead kind of becomes more and more ossified over time, that like you expect that that's going to be a part of a piece if you're minting. And so, I think that's like, to put my like economist hat on for a second, like I would tell the, if there's collectors watching, to try to ask that of like the projects that you're minting and say like, oh, what are you guys doing for charity? Because I think at the end of the day, like there is some degree to which so kind of you choose where your dollars go. Like the way I think about the projects I've done, where I've done 50% donated at mint, is like, it's just as much that, or even more so, that the people minting are donating than like that I'm donating as the artist. And I think that, the minter being able to have that relationship and that tie to like going back to provenance, looking at their token and the time that it was created and say like, hey, at the time that I created this, like, not only did it send some money to this artist, but I sent, $1,000 to give directly, and that's going to go directly to somebody who's in poverty. Like that is really powerful. And, I just really hope we don't lose that over time. And I don't think we will. Like I've been pretty inspired with how much traction that's gained across, multiple different artists, multiple different projects. Yeah, it's pretty mind-boggling.
We have great leaders. We have great leaders in that regard. Deeze is one of them, who are setting an example. And I think that's fantastic. And it tends to often be a lot of the wealthiest people in this space are, some of the most charitable. And I think that's...
You can't say I'm setting the example when this man here has set 4 projects, 50% of it straight to charity. Like he is the example. Like I'm following his lead. Like
it's the biggest mind fuck for me, man, to be like, I donated more money this year than like I had ever been exposed to in my life previous to this year. Like that's like
fantastic.
It's like a real mind fuck. I have a hard time.
Like looking at the number, like on that much ETH, like holy shit.
It's really weird.
It is a great thing to see, and just to see so many different examples of it, right? Be it coming from the creator, be it coming from collectors, be it coming from projects, or just individual initiatives like Cobain on, these very shows that we're on right now, going on and changing artists' lives or changing young people's lives who need medical help. Ice Bags doing the same. You just see so many different examples of it. I think this actually makes a really cool transition into what we're going to discuss on our next episode, as we kind of wrap up things here. And thank you again, Jake, so much for coming on. Big thanks to Sterling for coming on earlier, because, both of your perspectives were extremely exciting and enlightening, and shed light on a lot of different subjects that I think are super important. Next time, we are going to be having Dave Krugman on, who is a wonderful creator, a dear friend of mine, someone who's kind of become pretty integral to the NFT space, talking about, a deeper perspective on what NFTs mean for artists. As someone who came from a high profile position, in the art world prior to NFTs, and then had, this transformative experience of, wow, NFTs can be so much, when they can do so much for artists. And then, we'll also be speaking with Kalos from Parallel, the one on the hoodie. So, some of that perspective on gaming that we talked about, right? There's a lot more to dig into there. It's such a broad, nuanced topic. There's so many different genres that we need to kind of dive into and really understand why NFTs for gaming. What do they mean for gaming, and where is gaming headed in the future, embracing cryptocurrency as a backbone. So thanks again, Jake. Big thanks to Sterling as well for hopping on. And we're really excited to be doing this series, man. And awesome to have you on episode 1.
Thank you so much, Jake. I've remember like we joined MNOW together, and I've always thought like, dude, you're like one of the smartest people I fucking know. And when we were talking about, kind of storyboarding up what we wanted to talk about here, it was like everything we were talking about. I'm like, yeah, Jake would know that. Yeah, Jake would know that. Yeah, Jake knows that. I'm like, yeah, we got to get him on for this. So it's been a pleasure talking to you. And I really appreciate you taking the time to just come shoot the shit with us about this.
Yeah, I mean, I love talking about and thinking about this stuff. So it's the pleasure is very much mutual, and I appreciate you guys having me on. It's been super fun to chat.
Cheers, man. Thank you.
That's it for episode 1 of Looks Rare. Thanks so much for being here. We've got the entire series ahead. Thank you to Fitch and Deeze for putting this together. Thanks to our guests, and thanks to FTX for being our partner for Up Only TV. Go to uponly.tv/FTX to check it out today. As you know, you can swap directly from one asset to another right on FTX, track your portfolio like you've known and loved since 2014, even earn yield on the tokens that you keep in the FTX app. Thanks again to FTX. Go to uponly.tv/FTX. We'll catch you next time.